What is a high-risk merchant account and what makes a business fall into a high-risk category? Today I'm going to talk about 10 key things, key components to consider if you think that your business might fall into a high-risk category when applying for a merchant account. So to get started, anytime you apply for a merchant account in the high risk category, every bank and merchant account processor is going to have a prohibited list and a higher risk or elevated risk category. Prohibited list means you're not going to get approved. They are completely restricted. You're not going to get approved, and that would be the prohibited category. We're talking about high risk or elevated risk, and that just means that you can still get approved. You just have to make sure all of your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, and all of these things that I'm going to talk about today kind of align, and that in general everything makes sense. So this list is in no particular order because, as you'll see as I go through the list, they all overlap and they're all tied together in one way or another. So everything is important. And some of these may apply to you, others may not, but it's all things that underwriting will look at and consider when you're applying, again, if you're in a high-risk merchant account category. So without further ado, here's the list. Number one is the business category or the industry type, and this references the MCC code or the SIC code. So each bank is going to have categorizations, and they're going to place your business into a risk associated bucket, if you will, and that's where they're going to apply the prohibited list or the high risk list. So the prohibited list would be companies or industries like electronic cigarettes, fortune tellers, pharmaceuticals, and telemedicine, just for an example. And I will have links in the description of this video for these lists. Again, they're going to vary from provider to provider, so it's not an absolute list or written in stone that every provider is going to have the same prohibited merchants as they are for high risk. So just keep that in mind when you read the lists. But they will be linked in the description of the video and you can check those out. Elevated risk means that, again, it's a little bit higher risk than a normal merchant account. And these would be industries like non-licensed consulting or counseling, coaching consulting, direct marketing, dating services, and CBD oil businesses, which are quite common now, all falling into the higher risk or elevated risk category. Number two is the selling environment, and specifically here, the important thing to note is whether the card is present or not present. So are you a retail business or e-commerce? And in the e-commerce category, I would also place call centers or phone sales. So if the card is not physically present to be able to hand, the customer can hand the card over to you or your staff or employees so that they can swipe, dip, or tap with the NFC technology, it's going to be in a card not present environment, and that's a little bit higher risk, generally speaking, than retail. Okay, not always, because there's other factors that come into play that I'm talking about today on this list, but generally speaking, e-commerce and card not present is higher risk. So if you fall into that category, you're already a little bit higher risk than retail. Number three is the product or service itself. What are you actually selling? And maybe perhaps the most obvious on the list is, what is the thing that you're selling? So is it a controversial topic? Is it a controversial product? Is it a controversial service? Are you selling dating services, for example? Is it a dating app? Do you actually meet people on your website? Or are you selling consulting services about dating? Are you a counselor? There can often be a big gray area in terms of categorization and classifications, which is why, again, I'll remind you that it does vary from provider to provider. So each bank has maybe a little bit different spin on it or a different opinion on it, but that does matter. For example, again, are you selling arms or are you selling arms accessories? Are you selling accessories to a gray or a black market product, or are you selling the actual black market product that would put you into prohibited or very high restricted lists? So that's important to consider. So what is your product or your service that you're selling? Number four is the chargeback and general fraud likelihood that your business category is attached to. So what's the likelihood of a chargeback in your industry with all the variables that are given, that are set up with your company, how you sell, the environment that you're in, etc. If there's a higher likelihood of chargebacks in your industry and the way that you sell, it's going to put you in a little bit higher risk category. On a side note, if you haven't seen my video series on chargeback, I give a list of about 30 or more ways, 30 plus ways to help mitigate chargebacks and actually reduce them. There's even chargeback prevention services. It's all covered in those videos. I'll link them in the description and on the screen here. But if you want to watch those, go ahead and take a look at them. But in general, going back to our list today, chargebacks and fraud, what's the likelihood of your business falling into a category that has a high level of chargebacks? What type of clientele are attracted to purchasing the product or service that you're selling. So all of that's taken into consideration. Number 5 is subscription and continuity billing. So continuity just means recurring billing plans, whether it be monthly billing, you're billing in increments for a product or service. You have annual dues, annual fees, monthly fees, subscription-based services, you name it. If there's a recurring bill on file or a charge on file where a credit card's being charged every single month, that's continuity billing. And what are the risk factors that are associated with that? So are there forced continuity? Do you have on your website an order form page that requires somebody to make a purchase and then automatically be opted into a continuity program where they're going to be billed every single month? Is there a free trial? Do you put a card on file and enter into a free trial arrangement where you're not charged for the first 30 or 15 days or whatever it might be, but then the billing kicks in? Since that card was on file, the customer automatically gets charged. What's your billing services around forced continuity, recurring billing, and recurring charges? Now, it's worth noting that just because you have recurring billing or billing plans doesn't automatically put you into high risk, but it is one of the factors because, as I just explained, there are some higher risk practices that are associated with billing plans that could increase that likelihood of chargebacks, maybe some fraud, but certainly chargebacks could go up. So continuity billing and recurring billing is one of the considerations for high risk merchants. Number 6 is deceptive sales practices. And that overlaps a little bit with number 5 as I just shared, but specifically here, they look at, is there a high risk environment? Is there a high pressure sales environment, like maybe a call center? Or is there pressure that's somehow exerted onto the customer to make a purchase right then and there? So maybe there's in-home sales or on-site sales, or there's some sort of free gimmick that's attached to it and that would increase, like timeshare sales, for example, where it's known to be very, very high pressure to make a purchase right there, and all the freebies are added on to where people in the moment have a hard time saying no, and that credit card is charged. Is there buyer's remorse? That's a factor of all of this. Is there buyer's remorse to this? So that's one big factor. Is there arguably deceptive sales practices that are going on? And again, that's in the eyes of the bank. It's their call. They're the ones that are going to be underwriting it. So you have to keep that in mind, how you present it and whether your business has those deceptive sales practices. Number 7 is the delivery time of the product or service. So in other words, how long does it take for the customer to get the product or the service that they paid for? If it's a paid in full or even a partial, half down and then half later, generally, how long does it take the customer to get all of what they paid for in full? Is it 30 days? Is it longer than 30 days? A business that takes longer than 1 year, for example, to deliver the product or service that was paid for a year ago is really in a very high risk category, because for obvious reasons, the business in the bank is sitting on that customer's money while taking more than a year to deliver the actual product or service. So this is, that's going to automatically put you into a higher risk category. Additionally, it's worth noting that the timeline for the delivery of the good or service, whatever it is for your company, has substantially changed for low risk businesses and high risk businesses alike over the course of the last year and a half to almost 2 years. So from the date of this video, rewinding back to March of 2020 and all of the world events that have taken place during that time frame, banking laws were substantially changed to the point where the 30-day mark was really the sweet spot. So if your product or service took longer than 30 days to be delivered, most banks were putting every business into a really high risk category. Now that's an exception that is unique to that time frame that I gave you from March 20 to present. Moving forward, I'm not sure how long that'll take, but it is a very real consideration right now in the current. So it's worth mentioning once again that the time frame that you deliver your products and services is definitely worth noting. Number 8 on our list is personal credit, and specifically here we're talking about bankruptcies, poor credit scores, and particularly if you have tax liens or public liens or judgments and that sort of thing on personal credit. So behind every merchant account, there is a signer, even if it's a board member or, behind an LLC or an S corporation or whatever, there's still a board member that needs to sign and personal credits taken into consideration. If you have tax liens or judgments that are awarded or need to be paid back to the state, that oftentimes can turn it into a sort of a prohibited or an automatic decline, because it's really, really hard to get a merchant account approved if you have those judgments. So they are of consideration, and that's why they're making our list today. And number 9 is, what is the business credit? So is it a brand new business? Is it established? Are you signing up for a new merchant account or seeking a new merchant account? Or are you opening, this is brand new, never made any sales before, brand new bank account, new merchant account, new everything? What's the credit worthiness? How much documentation can you provide that you have a good risk credit score? Again, so that's why personal credit comes into play, and business credit, those two definitely overlap. But business credit is, one thing that they'll look at and that can be helped out with financials and personal credit of the signer that's behind the business. Number 10 is average volume and average ticket. So your total volume, is it seasonal, for example? Do you have lots of fluctuations up and down with the amount of volume that you're sending through the merchant account? So are you pretty even? Are you always doing 50 grand a month, 100 grand, whatever the volume is it pretty average? Or do you have really big spikes? Like, do you do product launches or have certain events throughout the year where your volume goes way up and then comes back down and levels off? Or are you selling really large average tickets? Are you in metal fabrication, or are you selling pallets of lumber where you're having 5-ticket or 5-figure average tickets, 10, 20, 30, $50,000 transactions? Or in some cases, are you doing 6-figure transactions where you're maybe selling really custom machined parts or whatever it may be? So do you have those really high average tickets that could place you in a higher risk category? If so, you want to be able to provide documentation for it. But certainly high average ticket and spikes or irregularities in the volume from month to month or week to week is something that account for setting the business up, because they want to know if it's going to happen once the merchant account is set up. And number 11, I'm going to give you a bonus idea, which actually is going to lead into part 2 of this video series, which I will link in the description. And that is going to be, number 11 is going to be the optics of the entire presentation of your business. It's important with all of these things, as you can see, that the underwriters are going to try and get a view for what your business is selling, how you're selling it, and just how you're operating in general. So the optics of the business is, how is your customer perceiving it? What does somebody does someone come to your website and see a nice layout? Is it clear what they're buying? Is it clear what the terms of service are, and just the general terms of the product that they're buying or the service? So when I say optics, I'm saying the general presentation of what your business is and how it's presented to the public and to the consumer or your customer is of importance, and that's all kind of intermingled throughout the 10 things that I just talked about today. So in closing, remember that there's a difference between restricted and prohibited. Prohibited is you're not going to get approved no matter what. It's against bank terms. High risk is elevated risk. It's the same thing. That means that you have to just have all of these things in line. And stacking these things, by the way, if your business falls into multiple categories of these 10 things that I talked about, or these 11 things that I talked about today, it makes your business higher risk. So It's all a big puzzle, and they put all the pieces together when it goes to underwriting. So at this point, there's two things that you can do. Number one is to click over, if you're doing research, which you are, if you're watching this video, you're wanting to learn about high-risk merchant accounts, you can watch the next video in the series, which is going to be linked at the end of this video and below and probably on the screen. So you can find that video, and I'll cover the next steps, which is the application information that you'll need to submit and all the data that goes along with that. So you can watch that video and reference it with this. And then number two is to find the calendar link that that will allow you to book a call with me or someone on my team, where we'll actually just talk with you about how your business fits into the mold of high-risk merchant accounts, and I'll just go through everything with you personally. So that's it for now. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, give me a thumbs up. That greatly helps out the viewership of these videos and helps more people to find them. So thank you for watching. If you want to see more videos like this, be sure to subscribe. Hit the little bell notification so you get notified when I release and upload new videos. So that's all for now. Until next time, I'm Brian Manning. Have a great day.